video for his single called Try That in a Small Town, which almost immediately became a lightning rod of controversy.
And unfortunately, this became the #1 song on U.S. iTunes. We have a problem in this country about race, and the biggest problem is we refuse to admit that it exists.
Rage. Like, now, I'm not saying that that's the greatest song the world's ever known, you know, but the level of outrage coming from people that are upset about that song is so strange.
There's a lot wrong here with this. This is a man who saw what happens when someone is out of control with their guns.
Yeah.
And Ted Nugent himself is again defending Jason Aldean, responding to this on a Fox News Sunday night appearance where he said, "I know there's a bunch of idiots out there, but you need to try to learn to get a kick out of the idiots. The idiots hate this Jason Aldean song because they hate when we push back against violence. They always get it 180 degrees wrong. The song is against violence. The song is about self-defense. The song is about protecting your loved ones in your neighborhood. If you find fault with the song that celebrates protecting your loved ones in your neighborhood, you might be going down to Target to the Satan display and getting on your knees. These are just weird people. We dismiss them out of hand because they got no soul. I laugh in their face."
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that his intent wasn't to, stoke division, glorify violence, or racism.
Due to the graphic nature of this program, listener discretion is advised.
All right, and welcome to the Liberty Unleashed and V Radio Show.
Yo.
I'm your host, Brian, for Liberty Unleashed.
And I'm Neil from Video.
How's it going? Hey, we had 2 weeks off, so how you been doing, man?
Man, honestly, it's kind of good to take a little time off. Because it was weird because every now and then I'll get this need to make a crazy amount of content and I'll be all fired up and then I'll just suddenly need to take a break. And that's kind of where I was at. So it was good. But I mean, because I did 6 or 7 streams in a row or something. And so there was plenty of content. But I made a couple of little things. But other than that, I've been focusing on my sports coaching stuff. And that's going pretty well. So, but yeah, that's about it.
You're a streaming maniac. That's what you are.
I was a streaming meanie, if that's a word, screaming meanie, streaming meanie.
Something
anyway,
like that. I got the webcam working. Hopefully that stays. I've been trying to get video to go with our broadcast. I know you told me that you had a face made for radio, so you prefer to keep your logo up there. and have a webcam, but I'm convinced that you're just so damn handsome that you don't want to put your face up there to make the rest of us jealous and hate on you.
That's actually what it is.
That's what I thought it was, but
it goes with the Velvet Boys because all the ladies are always like, "Oh, V, your voice is so beautiful and relaxing." It's like if they saw my face too, then they would become my slaves. So it's a moral obligation on my part to prevent my powers from being used for evil.
That makes sense, and we're all happy that you chose that path and decided to go that route for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, with great power comes great responsibility.
For sure. So, today we're queuing up and talking about, we got several topics, but we're going to do a reaction video to this controversial song by Jason Aldean. Now, I'm not a country music listener. I like all music. Mostly I'm a rock and roll fan. If you really got down to, if I had to pick and say, this is what I listen to, I'm a metal fan. But for me, country music, I grew up, and I'm sure you'll remember this back when the Nashville network was on and you had Hee Haw and shows.
Wait, you grew up? You grew up?
I know
that's a controversial statement. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, I'm used to, Alabama and Charlie Daniels and Hank Williams Jr. and country singers like that. I never really got into Garth Brooks and Billy Ray Cyrus and anybody after that. So
Hank Williams, I do pretty good singing that. It's like, the preacher man says it's the end of times and the Mississippi River, she's going dry. Yeah, I practiced that.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, what can I say?
But I actually never heard of Jason Aldean, surprisingly enough, until this controversy. And we're going to play the video here in a few minutes. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't even watch it or listen to the song. This is going to be the first time. So this reaction for me, I know what's going on. I've seen all the news. I've seen people on TikTok and other social media either defending it or complaining about it, things like that. You know, the intro video that we just had there, Whoopi Goldberg was on The View. All the people on The View were on there talking, and obviously not really happy with the video. But interesting, you know, the left and the anti-gun crowd here. You know, Jason Aldean, I guess a couple years ago, was in the middle of a mass shooting at a concert or something. Somebody started shooting it up while he was on stage.
I think that was the Vegas one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
So,
some guy in a hotel was just capping people from, like, I think it was like the 10th floor or something crazy.
yeah.
I looked at that. But anyway, go ahead.
Really crazy. But of course, so, you know, Whoopi Goldberg's stance is now all of a sudden Jason Aldean shouldn't be talking about guns, or, you know, shouldn't be defending people with guns, anything like that. And so, you know, it's interesting that they feel that way and they think that way because he's involved in a mass shooting. All of a sudden he should hate guns, or not defend them. But again, I've never heard this song. I've never seen the video, so that's going to reaction. If you don't know who Jason Aldean is, like me, he's an American country music singer. He's released 10 albums and 40 singles since 2005, Neil. And
Right.
I guess his biggest hit is a song called My Kind of Party, which was certified quadruple platinum. And of course, recently he's been under fire for this song, Try That in a Small Town. Now, this song was released in May of this year, and it got very little attention. Nobody was really talking about it. And then I guess around July 14th, the video for the song was released, and that's when all hell broke loose for Jason Aldean.
Right. And it's funny that anybody's even still watching videos. They were critical for a while. You had to have a video, like at the birth of MTV. And now MTV is like more or less just reality shows that don't even play music videos like they used to. But I remember like doing chores around my house and having MTV playing because it used to be like a way to actually listen to modern music. But anyway, so do you want to get started on this now?
Without any further ado, let's play this thing. I'm curious. I mean, you know, I've heard so much about the song. I want to hear it and see the video for myself now.
Now, you guys in the chat, you have to do me a favor. I don't know what's going to happen when we play this. If for some reason it just cuts the stream out, then let me know. And if that's the case, we'll just react to the imagery and then I won't play the song itself. I will bring up the lyrics, though, if for some reason we can't get to listen to it. So in any case. All right, so here we go. We're going to try that in a small town.
Sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like, cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Well, try that in a small town, see how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town. Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're gonna round up. Well, that shit might fly in the city. Good luck, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of.
Somebody wanted to pause it?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So right there in the beginning, you know, as we talk about reacting to this song and everything, again, I didn't hear it before, but I've heard what people were complaining about, you know, the lyrics about spitting on a cop and burning the flag and all this stuff. Now, obviously I don't know if you knew this, but all the footage in there is actual news footage, real footage. They didn't go create the footage. They used real protest, real footage that was out there. to be taken and used. Meaning they didn't go into a studio and say, hey, let's create this riot, or let's go to some place and create the look of somebody burning the flag. There was real news footage on there. From my point of view as a libertarian, interesting enough, I do get actually annoyed about people who have a problem with burning the flag, have a problem with you not standing for the national anthem, things like that. That's the part of patriotism that really drives me nuts. From my point of view, it's a cloth. It's a cloth with a symbol on it. If you paid for it, you bought it, you didn't steal it or anything like that. You can do whatever you want with the cloth. I don't see why it's very offensive, and I've never understood that. And I've known people who have talked about it, who find it very offensive, who get really riled up if they see footage or see somebody burning the flag or not standing for the national anthem. I've been to sporting events and I've sat there. Now, I haven't been accosted in any way for it personally, but I've heard about and seen people get, practically in a fight for not standing for the national anthem at an event. The whole Colin Kaepernick thing with him kneeling during the national anthem on football games. This is the part that I don't understand. I know country music is deep with that kind of patriotism. It really is. And I know that that's how they feel. So I get the sentiment about try that in a small town, but honestly, it annoys me that people get that way.
I would say, like, my comment on that, I think maybe some of it just comes from my indoctrination when I was in the Boy Scouts, but we were taught to revere the flag, but we were also taught to revere flags in general. Like, if you're going to shit on someone's flag, you're kind of like making a very grave statement about that person. Some of it is also just a reference to like where flags come from. And this is going to bring out the nerd in me, but like flags are part of heraldry and blazon. And like that used to literally be like a representation of your clan or your family. And if somebody were to actively disrespect it, it was generally considered to be a sign of like, you could get killed for that. Like knights would kill each other over that. That's how it should be.
I find it interesting in human life that symbols affect us that much, that we care that much about symbols, and that, again, putting them on flags or posters or whatever, it has this huge meaning to us, to the point to where we want to go to war, start a fight, anything like that over it.
Well, right. And allow me to finish, just so we're clear that I don't endorse that. I don't think that that's what you should do. I personally would never burn a flag. I would find it offensive and would call someone out if they did it, but I do believe they have the right to do it. When it comes to kneeling during the national anthem, I actually had to do a video about that because of all people, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who the woke think is their like superhero, just blatantly stated that kneeling during the national anthem is stupid. Like, if you want to be stupid, you have every right to be stupid. Those are her words. She wasn't even playing around. Like, she still defended their right to do it. But like, even one of their woke icons said that doing that is stupid and offensive and ineffective. Like, so the reason I bring that up is like my personal thoughts about it is just the question of like, should activism be effective? And I don't think that kneeling during the national anthem got the effect that they wanted. It didn't make anybody more interested in dealing with police brutality. It just made, Colin Kaepernick look like, like he was just being disrespectful. That's the issue. However, the libertarian in me still says both people should be allowed to do that. Like, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but if you're going to do it, like there should definitely, like my right to say that I find what you just did, gravely offensive is also protected.
Well, the same thing, like you said, that she called people idiots for wanting to kneel or sit during the national anthem. I would say equally the case for her just to say that, like, no right to judge me for that. Just because I don't subscribe to your version of patriotism and I don't worship this holy flag in this holy state, I don't pledge allegiance to the state. I have no allegiance to the state whatsoever. As we've talked about before, governments are corrupt. The state is corrupt. There's nothing benevolent about it. Why would I pledge allegiance to something like that? And why would you be offended? Why would anybody be offended because I don't want to pledge allegiance to something like that? You want to pledge allegiance? Pledge allegiance. If somebody doesn't want to pledge allegiance, how can you sit there and call them an idiot for not wanting to do that? We do the same thing with religion. People who are religious tend to judge people who are not. People who are not religious tend to judge people and say, oh, religion's stupid, about I can't, if you want to believe in a God, believe in a God. I mean, it has no effect on me in any way what you do. When it comes to that, you knock on my door and want to sell me Bibles, I just say no thanks, have a good day. I just don't find it offensive. I don't find it stupid. I would actually find it more stupid to pledge allegiance to the state, as it is. If you really are paying attention to what the state does, how the state acts, you're pledging allegiance to something that's violent, to something that's corrupt. Is that really what you want to do?
Well, and that's a very anarchist perspective. I think that the people who are offended by it are a bit more on the conservative patriotic side, or even left patriotic side. So like regular for V Radio, Gripper Crapper says, if you're only looking at the flag as an object, you aren't seeing what people on the right tend to see. That's where the conflict comes from. And I understand what he's getting at, but I also kind of want to comment on a couple of other major things, because people are usually finding the one or two lyrics that they dislike and then kind of talking about the whole song. And I think that's kind of what we're doing here. Like, I don't agree, for example, that it should be illegal to burn the flag. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think that's a good idea. But I think we both have stated that we agree that people have the right to do it. But, you're not going to be very popular in a small town of patriots if you do that.
No, and I agree with that. I mean, based on his lyrics, the song, and what he's trying to portray, I completely understand it. I don't find this so far to be the controversial video that everybody else out there who's trying to make something of it has. The next line that we got to after his chorus, he talked about getting his guns from his grandfather. And, I've heard people go up in arms about that. And again, it's another thing to me that just baffles me. I'm on his side on this one because I've inherited a handful of firearms from my grandfather. I did this when I was a teenager. Actually, I think I was 12 years old, so I wasn't even a teenager. I see no problem in that. I'm still, the whole anti-gun crowd is trying to make everything seem like, ooh, you got a gun from your grandfather. You got a gun when you were young. Ooh, that's so bad. This used to be the American way. I don't know how that became so bad and how it became controversial. I mean, I do know, but
they don't like guns, period, and they don't like people who like guns. But I'm confident my son's going to inherit my 9mm and my carbine. So, and I'm the left-leaning guy in the show. But one of the things is, chronologically, though, we're skipping past what I would say were the points that because on Twitter I had a lot of ridiculous arguments about this. And he starts off with sucker punch a guy, on the street, or carjack an old lady at a red light, right? That's where we begin, right? We're talking about the crime that goes on in the city right now that is just kind of being glossed over, or not really, honest, so far as what people are actually taking issue with. Like the flag issue, that's part of it, right? But I think sucker punching people on the side of the street is a cowardly, horrible thing to do. And I hope at some point somebody pulls that off and then fucks around and finds out, which sometimes does happen, but they're encouraging that. Actual Justice Warrior does a fantastic job of talking about the knockout game. And you have to remember, I grew up in the ghetto, and it literally it's like a sport. Like they joke around with each other about it. They laugh with one another about how they just randomly victimize somebody on the side of the street, somebody they've never met. It's just outright barbarism. And I think, but they're suggesting that's one of the common themes you're going to see throughout this. And especially if you ever listen to the discussions on Twitter, everybody is saying that this is racist in reference. And this is what I always ask them. So what behavior is he calling out in the song that you're so concerned about? And if that's the case, why do you associate that behavior with a certain race? But why do you think that's what they mean? Right.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, as I pointed out in my video about the truth about racism between Asians and blacks, is that there is a serious problem with racism between those two groups. And it just so happens that the majority of the anti-Asian hate crimes were perpetrated by blacks in those cities. It's not, it's not natural. It's not, inherent. Black people are not born genetically racist. That's all nonsense. But there is a cultural issue that's encouraging them to attack those people. And that's not in this song. He hasn't made any inflections whatsoever towards the race of literally anyone. And when you look at the video, it's largely Antifa, who are white, inflicting the majority of the violence that he's going to call out. And we'll get into that as we play more of the song.
Yeah, if you can rewind it a couple seconds just so we can get that second verse back in.
Yeah, sure. I just, but like, I mean, you went right to, ooh, guns. Let's talk about guns.
Yeah.
It's like, but we forgot about the inner city violence, man. I mean, it's only a 3-minute song, but like, if you go back to like, again, well, let me just start it over real quick.
All right.
Sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like, cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Well, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town.
Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't seen any black people in this video yet. Maybe the liquor store robbers, but they were wearing masks, so there's no way to know.
And I mean, even if you did, if it's real footage, it's real footage. It's not, again, it's not made up footage. It's not like he said, let's put these black people in there. They just took real footage. And you're right. I haven't seen any black people either. I know people were accusing this of what he was referring to was a sundown town. I'd never heard that expression before until this video took controversy, but apparently it's been around for a while and I've just been under a rock. So I would assume some other people haven't heard about sundown towns out there either, but it's basically an all-white town. That's what sundown town refers to. Wikipedia says sundown towns are also known as sunset towns, gray towns, or sundowner towns, and are all white municipalities or neighborhoods in the United States that practice a form of racial segregation by excluding non-whites via some combination of discriminatory local laws, intimidation, or violence. The term came into use because of signs that directed colored people to leave the town by sundown. Even though that is basically racially motivated, it wasn't just towards black people, from what I understand. It was Asians and Hispanics as well. Not that that makes it right or is justified, but it's not, the sundown towns aren't just one-sided racist, is my point. But I still haven't seen anywhere in here where I believe that he's talking about a sundown town.
Okay, yeah, and I don't get any benefit, any thoughts out on that either. I do know that, like, after kind of crushing this person in a Twitter argument for quite some time, they brought up, well, what do you think about the courthouse that they're in front of? And apparently 95 years ago, so nearly a century ago, there was a lynching there. And they called it a popular lynching site, as if this just happens on a regular basis there, and it's just common. So like they basically, the girl was implying that they chose this courthouse because of a lynching that took place almost 100 years ago. Like, again, if we're going to go infinitely back in time, I imagine within that 100 years, I could probably come up with some kind of civil rights thing that might have, like, victory that could have happened in that time.
I thought I saw somewhere that a Hannah Montana video was also shot at this courthouse, or a Miley Cyrus. So I guess it's only controversy when Jason Aldean does it. I don't know.
Well, I think, for me, the imagery that comes to my head is standing out in front of a courthouse. The primary buildings that Antifa was attacking and directing the Black Lives Matter riots to do were courthouses.
Right.
And that's also why when people were obsessed with saying that January 6th was some kind of evil insurrection and an attack on the government because they attacked a government building, I was like, that's been happening all year. Where have you been?
It's only an insurrection when Trump fans do it.
Right, exactly. Even to peacefully and patriotically let our voices be heard, right?
Right.
So in any case, but that was like, that's why I wanted to play the whole thing again, to kind of get back to, like, now we've recovered everything that we were at. Is that, he's calling out just general violent criminal behavior going on in the city. And then he also calls out, don't step on a flag and, stuff like that.
Don't spit in the cop's face. And
yeah.
I think I'll save some of my commentary for that because it's part of the course towards the end, at the end of the video, because I do have some things to say on that, but I want us to get through this video as well.
Sure. No, that's fair. And I know that's kind of an anarchist position to be somewhat anti-cop too, but to be pro-cop does not guarantee that someone is racist. And that is what they would suggest, that if you support the cops, you're automatically racist.
Well, I think they're suggesting that everything that doesn't suit their narrative is racist these days.
No, absolutely. All right, let's continue.
Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're gonna round up. Well, that shit might fly in the city. Good luck, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town full of good old boys, raised up right. If you're looking for a fight, try that in a small town. Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town. Try that in a small town. Ooh, try that in a small town.
So I do want to take a moment and comment that the Gibson Les Paul is a fantastic guitar.
There's something good that came out of that, right?
Yeah, it sounded really good, actually. Yeah, but I love the Les Paul. So.
You get my personal opinion here. I don't find it that exciting of a song. I mean, it's not something I would put in my shuffle and listen to. It has nothing to do with the message of the song. I'm just talking about overall. I don't find it a foot tapping song. It's kind of boring to me in a way. But that's neither here or there. That's just a personal opinion on personal taste when it comes to that. Now, Jason Aldean issued a statement. This was probably a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, whenever 24 hours after all the controversy from this video took place. And in that, he got on social media and he said that in the past 24 hours, I've been accused of releasing a pro-lynching song, a song that has been out since May and was subject to the comparison that I was not too pleased with the nationwide BLM protest. These references are not only meritless, but dangerous. There is not a single lyric in the song that references race or points to it, and there isn't a single video clip that isn't real news footage. And while I can try and respect others to have their own interpretations of a song with music, this one goes too far. As so many pointed out, I was present at Route 91 where so many lost their lives and that our community recently suffered another heartbreaking tragedy. No one, including me, wants to continue to see senseless headlines of families ripped apart. Try that in a small town for me refers to the feelings of a community that I had growing up, where we took care of our neighbors, regardless of the differences of background or belief, because they were our neighbors and that was above any differences. My political views have never been something I've hidden from, and I know that a lot of us in this country don't agree on how we get back to the sense of normalcy where we go at least a day without a headline that keeps us up at night. But the desire for it too, that's what this song is about. Sorry about my reading at the end there. It's kind of getting down on the page where I had trouble seeing. But,
right. And he
I would
said that
think
on Twitter. I don't know why, but it was not visible, but I remember reading it. So, but
yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
I would think that if he really meant that he was for lynchings and that he was for racism and he wrote a song that was for that, that he would stand by it and stand proud and be like, yeah, I don't like these people and I want to see this happen. Without his statement, just listening to the song, I still find nothing that has anything to do with lynching or racism.
Right. Me neither. And the funny thing also, like one of the conversations I was part of on Twitter was started by a couple of black conservatives who literally videoed themselves dressed like country people singing along to the song because they liked the message. But, you know, living in small towns quite a bit lately, the people of color that I meet largely brought their family there because they were sick of the bullshit in the city. Like that's just they leave for a reason, you know, because they want their kids to be raised in a small town.
Right.
You know, and when they say we protect our own, like, because this actually came up on a Facebook group of a community I used to belong to, and there were people of color who were like, no, I wouldn't appreciate it if you showed up in our town and started burning it down, and I'd be out and outside stopping you right next to the rest of the people who live here. And it ended up just blowing up in the person's face by trying to suggest that that small town was racist. Like one of the wrestling state champions out of that town that everybody treats like a hero is a black kid. So it was like, but they need to see the evil white supremacist boogeyman everywhere they go. Like it's, you run into this personality that it's like, whether they're rage addicted or just that being oppressed is part of their identity, that they need to, you know, that it fuels them, that it motivates them every morning to get up and look for how in some way anything has offended them or is an attempt to oppress them. You know, that's a mentality you can get caught up in. And that's what you end up doing when you start like you got to imagine people watched that video and then decided, let's go research every little aspect. And then they came up with 95 years ago, there was a lynching at one of the locations in the video. Like,
right.
What mindset are you in?
That's a great question. You know, music always comes with controversy. You and I growing up, I think I could, without even saying the name, just tell you a famous hip hop band that was full of a lot of controversy for their lyrics. I'm guessing you'll be able to spit it out real quickly on who I'm talking about here.
Are you implying that we are straight out of Compton?
That's exactly who I'm saying.
Right.
You know, one, I guess racism is okay if you're not white. So if you're racist,
from the rap band that was called Nice People with Attitude.
Nice People with Attitudes, right? And you know, very misogynist, very sexist, misogynist lyrics to it.
Incredibly, yeah. It's by far the most misogynistic music I've ever heard in my life. Which is why the strange bedfellows of the left is what I usually say when the woke left in particular finds themselves completely blind to these aspects of things, because they are obsessed with the misogyny and literally everything else around them, the third wave feminists meaning, but for some reason have zero problem with gangster rap, where literally women are totally objects, men are completely like encouraged to be players, which means lying to as many women as possible and sleeping with them. Like, it is a horrible message, you know, and it leads to so many problems in the inner city when kids try to emulate it.
Right. And, you know, there was a lot of controversy. Obviously, it didn't go without its controversy, which I think was the point I was making here, that every heavy metal has had its controversy to it. You go down the list: country music, rap music, metal. They've all had at some point some artist or artists that come out and say and do stuff that's controversial. In some cases, I mean, that's what sells. So you're somewhat encouraged to do it in the industry. Like, hey, you know, you need to get people really going, oh my God, did he really just say that? Because that's how you stand out and sell stuff in the industry, without a doubt. Again, this song didn't really have anybody talking about it until the video came out. And then that really fired people up because of the footage that went with it. Now, watching that video, I would repeat that I still don't personally find anything. Everybody interpreted different, but I don't understand how. And yes, you're okay. You're allowed to interpret stuff any way you want. I'm not going to say you're not, but watching the ladies on The View and their interpretation and passionately claiming that this is a racist video and that he purposely wrote a song to spark racism and division, I cannot see in any way where they got that out of it. What I got out of the song is exactly what you said earlier. Fuck around and find out.
Right. Ironically, people are making Kyle Rittenhouse memes saying, I remember when somebody tried that in a small town. And ironically, that is kind of the example, because the community of Kenosha had finally just had enough, and the city was like not getting involved. The cops were ordered to stand down. So a group of armed people went out to protect their property. They left it, at that. And, but this is what I kind of got out of all of my arguments. For one thing, they want opposing riots to equal racism. If you have any negative thoughts about the 2020 riots, you're racist. It can't be anything else, but you're racist. So they want that to be racism. They want any kind of patriotism to be racism, and they want any kind of I like owning my guns to be racism. That's just they never want to spit that out. They're not going to tell you that you're racist for opposing riots. But that's why I always ask them the tough questions. I say to them, so what behavior in the video do you associate with a specific race? And why would opposing the behavior in the video or in the lyrics of the song, other than maybe obviously we've been over the issue with the flag and all that, right? But so why are you against people saying don't mug people, don't randomly sucker punch people on the street? Don't try that in a small town. Is there some reason we need to endorse that behavior, the whole sucker punching people on the street, that this is like a critical freedom of yours? And they always try to say, well, no, what they're trying to say is if you try to, have a BLM protest in our town, we're going to do something about it. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So are you acknowledging that BLM protests are violent riots that might involve sucker punching people and carjacking people? Is that what you're suggesting? And of course they don't want to spit that out. But at the end of the day, these people don't want to talk about the riots. And the reason why is because it's against their narrative. But but they still, however, like to try to make it out that was what they call an uprising, that they try to glorify it. It's like, I was so mad that rapist who was breaking a restraining order against his rape victim, when the cops arrived and he resisted arrest with a knife and tried to leave in a car with the woman's kids in it. I'm so upset that guy got shot in the back, that the only solution that I have would be to walk down the streets of Kenosha, systematically burning down buildings, attacking random people like an old man. We're going to break his jaw because he's trying to put out a fire in the furniture store that he built. And that will make me feel better about the cops shooting a rapist in the back. The whole thing makes no sense. It certainly didn't improve race relations, and it definitely is not going to solve any issues about police brutality.
Right. And there's, I think, separate issues there as you're getting to. There's police brutality, there's racism, and there's response. I mean, response is part of the issue and how they're responding. I was young when the Rodney King happened. When I saw that, I thought it was the worst thing that cops could ever do to somebody at that time. That's the footage that I saw because I was young and didn't have a lot of experience seeing what cops do. And it made me lose a lot of trust for the police, even at a young age. When I saw the response to it, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I had ever seen. I didn't understand why they were tearing apart the city, burning down shop owners, why they weren't at, the police station, tearing apart the police station, tearing apart the mayor's office. I couldn't understand it at a young age and comprehend. Why would they go down the street and take this out on their neighbors, the people that they go shopping at the store to, the people that own the business in their community and essentially help the community. If you're mad at the cops, go turn over cop cars, go throw Molotov cocktails at the police station itself. So both things to me were watching that at a young age were ridiculous. The cops doing what they did to Rodney King, absolutely ridiculous. The people's response to it, absolutely ridiculous. And I thought, man, maybe we can evolve beyond this. And then Kenosha happened. And I was like, well, I guess not. Both the police haven't gotten any better and the response to it hasn't gotten any better. And then, of course, we know, the division that happened and how people still feel about Kyle Rittenhouse. To me, Kyle Rittenhouse and that incident goes along with this song. That's that fuck around and find out type thing. Like, I'm here defending this shop owner so his business doesn't get looted, doesn't get burned down. You're a criminal. You're coming at me, attacking me. That's going to end very badly for you, which it did for the people who tried to attack Kyle. It ended very badly. It's amazing to me when you listen to this song, when you watch the footage of Kenosha, that anybody can be against Kyle, but defend the people at the riots, defend people at, whatever you want to call them, the protests, the riots, whatever word. It's just amazing to me that happens.
Well, and when you talk to them, the chronology of events for them seems to begin with Kyle Rittenhouse showing up. Nothing that happened before that. Right. It's as if the entire incident was a white kid with an AR-15 showed up in Kenosha and shot two people.
And then all hell broke loose.
Right. They don't ever discuss what the circumstances were, and they will continually say he should not have been there. Right. But the rioters should have been, apparently. And then they were obsessed with he crossed state lines. I did a video about this because well over 100 protesters / rioters were arrested, some of which from as far away from as Oregon State. But it's only important if Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines, right? The whole thing was just ridiculous. And when you bring up LA, that I did a video also just analyzing the science, because this is scientifically proven. It's not a matter of opinion that these riots destroy local economies, cause more poverty, more unemployment, and then in turn, therefore, more crime, and also, therefore, more police shootings. Literally nothing has been accomplished from any of them. And LA is still an economic crater and just keeps getting worse. And because nobody's going to want to, in the scientific study that I quoted in my video, they compared for example, the rebuilding of, I think it was Miami after a hurricane, right, to the recovery of LA or the lack thereof. And what it comes down to is this. If you decide as a community that you reserve the right to destroy random property that has nothing to do with your grievance, nobody's going to want to invest in that place, right? But why would you open a business there? Why would you open a store there? Why, I wouldn't, no sensible investor would do that, but they seem to think, well, if you don't, we need you to invest in our community or you're racist or whatever. It's like, look, I'm not racist, but I'm not going to put my money where you reserve the right to destroy my property, even if I have nothing to do with what you're mad about, right? And even if destroying my property won't do a damn thing to improve the situation that you think you're trying to improve by engaging in that activity, it's just crazy. So that's the reason. One of the funny things is I actually argued with, of all people, Martin Luther King's daughter about this topic.
We argue with everybody. That doesn't surprise me.
I know. I'm good at that. And she tried to imply in some way, indirectly, because they all do this. They try to rewrite history about Martin Luther King. He was very articulate about why he opposed riots. And it wasn't just that it's wrong. He said that it causes more problems than it solves. And he literally described all of the things I just mentioned. It doesn't do any good for your community to do those things. So ironically, that's why I always come back to this, is that the more I look at this every day, it seems to me that whomever is manipulating the current brand of racial activism is diabolically racist, because everything that they're suggesting to people of color to do to liberate themselves will only hurt them. None of it is helpful. They won't spend any time trying to help the community in the way that, for example, Pastor Corey Brooks, one of my previous guests, he's a pastor in Chicago, like deep in the worst part of the country as far as crime. And his activism is focused on getting kids jobs and getting them educations and keeping them out of gangs. And that guy struggles for funding, right? The Black Lives Matter, they got $1 million mansions for, essentially being the ambulance chasers of the racial justice movement.
Well, and they didn't even give any of the money, from all the reports I've seen, to the causes they said they were going to give it to. They just took the money and bought mansions with it. Right. I live in Pennsylvania now. I live in suburban area, which is outside of Harrisburg, which wouldn't necessarily be considered a small town unless you compare it to Philadelphia or New York City. Then we'd definitely be a small town. I've lived in California. Where I lived out there was Oakdale, and that was definitely a small town. I've lived in New Mexico, and I've lived in both Albuquerque, and then I lived in small towns on the mountains of New Mexico. And living Albuquerque would have been the biggest city that I've ever lived in. Albuquerque was flooded with gang violence, a lot of gang violence. In fact, I've seen my share of drive-by shootings living there. So going back to his song and that message, it doesn't, Albuquerque got to drive-by shootings. These small towns out there didn't deal with it and didn't have to deal with it because it's different. In Philadelphia, for example, Albuquerque, all these places, and as much as a lot of people are probably going to hate that I say it, they're very liberal. And very liberal means they have very strict gun laws, which means law-abiding citizens don't carry the guns, just the criminals do. You get outside these cities and you don't have these strict gun laws, and the criminals don't go there and commit crimes. Again, we're back to the fuck around and find out.
Right.
But it's not just that. It's the sediment, the small towns. You have that degree of separation. Everybody knows everybody in a small town. Okay. You go into the grocery store, you go into the local bar, you know everybody there. They're all your neighbors, essentially. And yeah, so what he's talking about is that feeling of looking out for each other, because it's not just some random stranger doing something. The cities have so much of, and I don't think mankind's meant to live in big mega cities like New York City, like Philadelphia, like Los Angeles. I really don't think we're meant to do that. I think we're meant to be small town, small village people. And, you and I have talked about that plenty of times, how it's much easier to manage government at that level, whether you want to be an anarcho-communist or an anarcho-capitalist. It's going to be much easier to accomplish on a small scale. You try to do it on a big scale. I would never want to be the mayor of Los Angeles or Philadelphia.
Right.
I don't ever want to be a mayor in general, but if I was choosing where I'd run, I would definitely pick a small town. It would be so much easier to manage and be part of that community than a big town, because these big cities, I mean, it's another day for them. A drive-by in Albuquerque was just another day, another hour,
right?
Nothing else. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the funny thing is,
and that's a big deal. You get to a big city, and that's like, yeah, we see that every hour.
Well, right, and that's why I grew up in a big city ghetto. And Pontiac is one of those cities in Michigan that was essentially abandoned by the audio industry, so it just turned into nothing more or less after the fact. It's like like an old copper town or something. It's just sitting there and desolate. But crime shot up, and when I realized I wanted to raise children, ironically, the guy with the Bernie Sanders sticker on the back of his car, chose to move to small country towns because I knew my family would be safer there, and the reality is, if there was ever to be a problem, I'm very confident that I could count on my community to help me protect my family from rioters or whatever else. When you get into the bigger cities, it's the people don't have those same relationships. Like you said, everybody knows everybody, and that's why any intentional community works better when it's smaller. People need to be accountable to each other. I think that our society has, quote unquote, evolved, and I put that in quotes for a reason, that you don't know your neighbor anymore, right? You don't know, even you probably don't know who your city council is. You don't know who your school boards are until now. Like, people are starting to realize, man, being asleep on the wheel in local politics didn't work out so great for us, but now they're running for elections in these smaller positions and directly affecting their communities. So,
right. The police work in the large towns. I know, my uncle, I was a child, so this was 80s, maybe early 90s, went from New Jersey to New York City for whatever reason. I think it was work. While he was doing whatever he was doing, his car got stolen. So of course, naturally call the cops come out, take a report. And in the questioning of, is he going to get his car back? They basically laughed like, yeah, right. The amount of cars that were stolen and are stolen in New York City, and the resources that the cops have to get them back, basically the cop would be like, you'll be lucky if we find it. And if we do, it's most likely going to be beat so bad, you're not going to want it back anyway.
Right.
Again, these things don't happen like that in a small town because there's not too many places you can run and hide once you do something like that, like you can in a big city. But going again back to this video, if I was to break it down from an anarchist or libertarian point of view, I definitely don't see it as a song that was written about race or lynching or anything like that. I can see it as a conservative, a right-wing country singer who is very patriotic, singing about a part of the country that he loves and wants to see thrive. I have issues, as we talked about, with patriotism and with, people getting upset about burning the flag. I have the same issues with the defund the police. It's not as an anarchist or a libertarian that we're not fans of police. And obviously, if you're an anarchist, you're not a fan of any authority out there, any government agent, any government authority. What I don't like is when these Antifa people get labeled as anarchist. It's absolutely wrong. They are not anarchists. They are the complete opposite. They'd probably be communists, the type that are trying to start trouble, to incite riots, to install different type of government that's not a good free government, And as you pointed out, most of these wanted to defund the police so they had free reign to commit a crime. Anarchists don't want police around because we don't like people telling us what to do and how to live our lives. Not that we want to commit crimes. There's a complete difference there. However, and what I find problem more so with the conservative side of things is that you're supposed to give policemen some special kind of respect that other people wouldn't naturally get. And, again, most libertarians and all anarchists 100% disagree with that. You wearing a badge and a gun doesn't make you any different. You still have to earn that respect, just like anybody else. You putting on that uniform doesn't get you any other respect. And I go back to, again, yes, there are good cops out there, that don't do things above and beyond what how do I describe this? They're not out there obviously beating people down. They're not out there looking for trouble, like purposely pulling over somebody because of the color of their skin, things like that. But the bad cops overshadow whatever would be of a good cop, and they make the point to any anarchist would try to make, that this is what you get when you have agents of the government going out and doing that. There's so many laws out there that I don't think, again, trying to be a cop and remember all the laws and remember everything is quite impossible. And then you have to essentially, if it's traffic violations, you're essentially extorting people for a victimless crime and then saying, well, our job's tough, everybody gets mad at us. Well, of course, I don't want to start handing over money for I didn't stop at the stop sign for 5 seconds. It was only 3 seconds. And now you pull me over and start asking me all these questions. Where am I going? What's in my car? All this stuff. And by the way, here's your $150 fine. Come on. In mankind society, I think we can do better than that. And so if we want a police force, that's one thing. I think, again, we can do better. We can stop having them harass people over small victimless stuff. War on drugs, horrible. You want to start busting people for smoking a joint, you're going to get people pissed at you. That's how it's going to go. You're going to get people saying, I hate cops because of that kind of thing. They're acting as government agents to the politicians, and it's not going to end well.
So let me kind of clarify a couple of things. For one, like even in my personal brand, like, Jacques Fresco, for example, I would call him an anarchist in his own way because he wants to evolve past the need for a state. But the key point is evolution. And the reason that I can't go along with abolish the police, particularly the people who are pushing for it, is a black individual who I'm friends with named Robert, who used to go to these protests and just quietly listen because people will say things in front of him as a black man that they may not say in front of other people. I said, so what do you think of the abolish the police crowd? And he's like, well, they usually come in one of two forms. And I said, well, who are they? He's like, well, one, people who are utterly naive about crime. Like they have no idea what they're talking about. They've never seen a drive-by. They don't know what it's like to live where we live. They're, often like spoiled white kids who think they know the hood because they drove through my neighborhood once to go to a nightclub or a concert or something. He's like, and I said, so what's the other group? And he says, criminals. And I laughed. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, just people who are career criminals that I know. Of course, they want to abolish the police. And that's when he made the comment. He's like, you know, because he watched my videos, he said, has it ever occurred to you how odd it is that of all the random people that Kyle just happened to run into, that every one of them was like some kind of crazy felon, dangerous criminal? Of course they want to abolish the police. So if you want to get to that point, one of the major things that Fresco points out is that you have to have a serious evolution in the way people interact with each other and a change in their values before you can do such a thing. You
and
have to, well, just to finish, you know, the anarcho-communists and Antifa, generally when you try to talk to them about this stuff, because I want to be clear, there are a lot of anarcho-communists who do not claim them, who think that they are nuts. Like, you know, but most of them, they live in this weird, bizarro world where, one, they think they're going to replace the police. Like when I talked about it when I was on one of their private forums, because you can sneak into them sometimes, you know, they said, well, I said, well, what are you guys going to, you know, like, abolish the police is interesting and all. What are we going to do when the cartel shows up to fill the vacuum? Because they would. And they're like, oh, well, what do you think we're going to do? What, you think us Antifa militants are going to stand down? And I'm thinking to myself, no, what I think is if you try to throw bottles at the cartel the way you do at cops, they're going to show up at your house and cut your head off and then start human trafficking your mother and your sister. That's what I think is going to happen. They don't have any clue what they're talking about. They don't have any concept whatsoever. And in many cases, they don't really think it that far out, you know, and that's why if you start asking questions like that in an Antifa forum, you'll get banned really quick. So
I try to avoid Antifa forums.
Right. I'm investigating, you know, like,
but
you know,
I mean, that's what I said. If you're going to have a police force, you can do better. There's, you know, first of all, the politicians have war on drugs, war on crime, war on poverty. There's all these wars, which essentially equal war on the people. And they're expecting the cops, the law enforcement, to be part of this war. And it's not just about traffic violations. You know, again, it's profiling, it's everything. It's, you know, walking down the street with a hoodie on at night, and all of a sudden somebody pulls over and says, where are you going? Why are you doing it? You look suspicious. We can do better than that. And if you're going to have a police force, which again, you know, as an anarchist, I'm just not for that kind of authority. I would say you still need to have a better police force and not just accept it for how it is now. Because
let me make a quick comment on that, because I don't want to forget this point. But it also comes down to the police should work a lot better in a small town too, because they're directly accountable to the people that they're policing because they're elected. Like
usually in the small towns, you deal with the sheriffs and less of police. You deal with county sheriffs.
And if you did deal with if you have a chief of police, then he's appointed by the mayor, who's directly accountable to your small town.
Right.
You know, anyway, continue.
Well, and that's the point. Like, you know, you talked about cartels buy out and bribe police officers all the way up to the top of chief of police. So these guys are not anything where they are always there looking out for the citizens to serve and protect. It's usually quite the opposite that's happening with that. And, you know, you talk about, you know, the hood, the ghettos, and the gang violence and everything. In Albuquerque, you could see a shootout happen, and a half an hour later, still no cops show up. So it's not like they're just out there like waiting for the call. Like, got a crime? I'll be there. You know, it's not happening. It's not working the way that people who defend having the police think that it works, because it has not been working that way.
And I think that it's important also always to remember the scale of what we're discussing. But like, you know, Albuquerque, don't you guys have like a huge cartel problem, or is that just a Breaking Bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a big gang-ridden area, so yeah, it's a huge cartel problem,
right?
Without a doubt. Which means, again, it's, you know, there's aside from violence, there's money flowing in, which means bribes, politicians, cops, everybody being bribed. And this is again where I keep pointing out the problems with that stuff. When every time you can say, well, you know, we can't get rid of the police because of this, I can point out how all these scenarios of them being bribed, from them planning evidence on people to help another rival gang, help a rival political party, whatever, you know. It's not, as I said before, we could do better. And so as we bring this back to Jason Aldean's song, again, I do not find it racist. I do not find it controversial. It's nothing that I didn't expect from a conservative country music singer to sing about. They're very patriotic. They very much believe in the national anthem and pledging that allegiance to the United States of America. And I thought the message of the song was exactly that: fuck around and find out.
Sure.
And again, I'm all for defending yourself, defending your life, defending your property. I'm all for stand your ground. Laws I'm not for, but I live in a state that has stand your ground, quote unquote, laws, as it should. There either shouldn't be a law or it should be specified that you're allowed to do it. Either just don't make it a law at all and say it's understood that you're allowed to do it, or specify that you're allowed to do it. Either way, I'm for you defending yourself and defending your way of life, assuming that you don't hurt other people, that you don't take the life, liberty, or property of somebody else. I'm all for live and let live.
Well, and then I would say that I guess I didn't, and I realized I didn't clarify the end of that, was just to say that if you want to get rid of the police, then you have to have a viable solution that actually is going to work. And there are a lot of things that have to change about the way our society interacts with each other to make it really practical. That's
Right.
where the problem is. And these guys, they don't acknowledge that. They just want to throw a lever. They think that Chaz Chop was proof in some way of their concept, even though the Chaz Chop police literally shot an innocent man and wounded a 14-year-old boy. So they weren't any better at it. And then there's this hilarious clip I did a video about, because the George Floyd Memorial no-go zone was a no police zone. And there were all these journalists, standing in front of the memorial doing, a thing. One of them was actually a BBC journalist, a British journalist. He's like, and then they're talking about passing extensive police reform, and a gunfight literally breaks out right behind the guy, like live on television, right? And then they interviewed a bunch of people in the area, and like the local business owners, many of which were black, I might add, were totally upset that there was no police presence because their businesses were getting robbed constantly. So like, if you want to make statements about turning off the police, then you have to have some kind of viable alternative. And I think that there's a lot of aspects of that I don't think many of these activists are aware of. And in many cases, like I remember one of the Antifa guys I talked to just said, well, the cartels will be on our side. I'm like, you really have no idea who you're talking about.
Right.
Like, I mean, go look at El Salvador. Like, I just watched Actual Justice Warriors thing about that, and I was just enraged. Like, the MS-13 cartel literally at one point told the government, you're going to do what we want or we're going to make you pay for it. And what make you pay for it was they sent out their soldiers to randomly shoot innocent civilians. Like one of them was a mom pushing her baby carriage. At that point, I'm like, you know what? Screw your concerns about the human rights violations against the cartel members. Declare war. Like, if you're going to be an organization that shoots innocent people to get what you want, that's why I said Antifa has no idea what they're talking about. The level of barbarity that they'd be inviting into this country if they ever got what they want is not something that's going to get stopped by a group of kids in black hoodies, with baseball bats.
Yeah, and Antifa's not a grassroots organization. It's a paid for by somebody, I would say George Soros, but I have no actual proof of that. But this is a shill, a tool, that group. They're not actually anybody with any real thoughts of their own and real political ideology. Like you said, most of them are probably criminals who just want to keep committing crimes. And that's it. They're really should not even be talked about in the news. They should everybody should ignore them so they go away. But as you talk about, if you're going to say get rid of the police, you better come up and talk about a better solution. I can tell you, being a libertarian for the last 15 years or however long, that nobody wants to listen to other solutions. They tell you that. They say, come up with a better solution. They say the same thing for roads, for education. As libertarians talk about privatizing things, the minute we use that word, it's shut down. Like, oh, you can't do that. That won't work. People don't even want to hear or listen to that side of it and how you could make it work. Does that mean it would be 100% perfect? No, I would never claim that to be the case. Nothing's 100% perfect. Human race is a violent race. We have a lot of violence in us, and there's nothing a libertarian, an anarchist, or anybody with good intentions can do to take that out of the human race 100%. What we're talking about is, as we said, there's ways to do better with the police force. And from a libertarian point of view, I've never been able to talk to a conservative or liberal about alternatives. The system we have now is a system people are used to, and that's what they want to hear. How can you make it better in the system we have without changing the system we have? It's the same thing for taxes. Everybody every year complains about the IRS when tax season comes, but go ahead and mention eliminating the IRS, and people go, no, I believe you still have to have taxes. How are you going to have schools and roads without it? They don't want to hear the better solution or an alternative solution. I call it the better solution. We'll call it alternative solution for now until we can initiate it and prove that it's better. Okay. But it doesn't matter. They don't want to hear it. And naturally where all this comes down to. So when you talk about, if you're going to say defund the police or get rid of the police, give me a better solution. I'll give you an alternative solution. You tell me if we're going to enact it or not and try it. You don't have to do it across the board, across the country. Pick a town, let's do it. You know what I'm saying? They've already tried complete gun control. Take Chicago and Detroit and look at how that's going. It's not going too well for that kind of trial. So we can already look and say, look, gun control doesn't work. We have some examples over here that are pretty much showing our side, where violent crimes go up anywhere where law-abiding citizens aren't allowed to defend themselves properly. So give us the same thing. Let us privatize some schools in an area with no public schools at all. And let's see what happens to the education there. Let us have a privatized police force in a town and see what happens there. You know what I'm saying? And then compare the notes. And then you tell me whether the alternative solution was better or not.
Yeah, and I'm willing to discuss those. I think it more ends up having to be, about like in the short term, in where we are at right now, because that's like I said, when I talk to anarcho-communists about Antifa, one of the things that I bring up was like, in LA, for example, one of the times that Antifa showed up and stabbed somebody, they showed up at a peaceful anti-mask, anti-vax rally, right? And to me, I'm like, if you're an anarchist and there's a group of people that are protesting government overreach, why wouldn't this be an opportunity for you to go talk to them about maybe why they should be anarchists instead of attacking them, which is what they did. They just literally just walked up and started trying to hit people. And unfortunately for them, they were they were ready for him, and which is why Antifa got their ass whooped that day and chased out of there, but not before they stabbed a kid in the chest. So but my point is that there's definitely something going on there. Do I believe that they're all paid by the government? I think what's going on there is that there's a cult kind of mentality, and I do think that there are some true believers among them, but I also definitely believe that the government is in some way involved. But in the same way that we saw on January 6th, in the same way that we saw with the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping, and I actually just did a show about this because Glenn Greenwald was pointing out that, all that stuff you and I were worried about when the Patriot Act passed is starting to come to fruition. Look at that.
Crazy conspiracy theorists, right?
Right, exactly.
Talking about.
Right.
When I was looking into the Jason Aldean song for this show, and I make those intro videos, so I have to go on YouTube and find content for that. Between TikTok and YouTube, I found a handful of, Black people who were defending the Jason Aldean song, who said the same thing that we said, that they see nowhere in there where he's pointing out race of any kind, where he's talking about a lynching of any kind. And it's amazing when they do it. If you go and read the comments, if you're on TikTok, you can see people who stitch the video or whatever that's called, where they give a reply to it. One Black person says, look, you guys are wrong. This video isn't about race. It isn't about lynching. They get called all kinds of stuff. Uncle Tom, whatever all the other names are that say you're a Black person who's sympathetic or supports white people. They get equally blasted as you and I would get blasted for that. Right. That I find that very interesting, which means that what it is it's just complete agenda driven. It has nothing to do with that person thinking for themselves when they go after that person. They're part of some agenda that they want to see happen. And so therefore they're not going to listen to reason. They're not going to listen to other people interpreting that in any way that's different than what they feel that video is about. This one girl, she was a Black girl. She was really going off. She was just really saying how this is the most racist song she's ever heard. And I'm thinking, really? Out of all the songs out there, that's the most racist song you've ever heard. She obviously didn't listen to a lot of
Atomwaffen punk music, because that's pretty racist.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot of neo-Nazi music out there. I mean, come on.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
So there's nothing you can do about those people. It's just with the modern social media and all these videos and social media apps, it's just a way to scream loudly about something and be heard. And in most cases, I think that's what the people want more than anything, is just that dopamine rush from seeing all the views and all the likes that they get on their video when they put out something like that, and not so much how they really feel and how they really believe.
Right. And I guess to cap that off, because we also are going to be talking about RFK today, I would say that what I observed the most about it is that there is not a sufficient amount of racism to meet the demand that these people, particularly race grifters who make their money on this issue, there's never enough of it. So the supply is not meeting the demand. So they need to make things that are make things racist that are not anytime they want. You know, I mean, and they need to be able to have ways to generate more of it. So that's why I said earlier, if you've got to go 95 years into the history of somewhere to find some justification for your theory that this supposedly is a racist song and was written for racist reasons, you know, then maybe you should rethink your life. Maybe you should rethink, you know, your purpose. These are the kinds of people that if they want someone canceled will go into literally 10 years of their Twitter history, right, to try to find something. So, you know, in the end, I don't believe it's a racist song either. I do totally live in a small town, because if, you know, people tried to do those things where I live, it would not go well for them. That was a choice consciously that I made. And I don't think in any way that it's racist to not, you know, to oppose rioting. I don't think it's racist to oppose sucker punching people on the side of the street, you know, because you think it's funny. And I don't support carjacking, and I don't support robbing liquor stores. There's so many behaviors that were called out in that song, you know, that they are saying it's racist if you call these things out, which again, like I said earlier, kind of comes back to, what are you implying? Are you suggesting that black people sucker punch people? Are you suggesting that black people carjack people? Are you suggesting that Black Lives Matter riots were violent and had fires and burning? Because if you're saying that, because I haven't said that, the lyrics don't say that, you know, there's nothing about the song that says that. So if you're saying that, what are you implying, right? You know, about the people in question.
That's what I'm saying. They could have picked the least controversial song to make the most controversy out of.
Right.
Today. I mean, it's just amazing. I can't to the amount of time that we spent reacting to this video because of everybody else out there talking about it and making it some big deal. And when I sit there and look at it and go, this song is no big deal. It's just another country song. That's all that thing was another conservative country singer singing a song who's proud of the American, you know, way he grew up and nothing else. Taking that in courthouse, you know, you talked about how people brought that up, that some lynching happened there. If you can prove that they purposely selected that courthouse because of that lynching that happened 95 years ago, you might have a case. But to just sit there and say, well, a lynching happened there 95 years ago and they shot a video there, so they must be racist, that's a stretch beyond all stretches. And you don't even deserve to have any views or any listens on your TikTok or YouTube channel if that's where you're going to go with it. I mean, that's ridiculous. You would have to have proof that the director of the video, that Jason Aldean, that some band member said, hey, a lynching happened at that courthouse, I think we should use that.
Yep, I agree. And I want to take a moment to give a shout out here to Cool Frog. He's another friend of the show. And if you guys haven't checked out his channel, you should totally do it. Cool Frog. If you could DM me a link to your channel, I'll throw it into the I'll throw it in here so that people can go check you guys out. I know you guys do good long streams. I've listened to some of them. So if you guys haven't checked out Cool Frog, you know, because Brian and I are from the generation of independent media that actually believed in cross promotion. If you like my content, you'll probably also like Cool Frog. So, all right. So was there anything else on that topic before we move on?
No, other than, you know, I obviously thank everybody for tuning in, and make sure that you subscribe to Liberty Unleashed and V Radio if you're new here to either one. We're simulcasting. We do this usually every Sunday. Like we said at the beginning of the show, we had 2 weeks off, but usually we come on every Sunday, 2 hours, and just talk a bunch of bullshit that we feel like we want to talk about, including controversial songs that aren't controversial at all. But we thank everybody for listening and tuning in and being part of the show. If you're watching this, you see that we do put the people's chat up there. We do read the chats. We do try to interact.
And just real quick, we're not done yet, by the way. I think people think we're about to turn off.
Yeah.
But no, we have another topic we're discussing, so don't take off. Anyway,
Yeah.
continue what you're saying, Brian.
Yeah, I'm just saying that we do like to interact. We're that show that likes to interact with the crowd. And so please come on over, join the chat, and get in there. We can't obviously put everybody's comments up on the screen, and we can't read them all 100% all the time, but we do like to interact with you and be part of it. And we appreciate everybody that comes and listens and chats with us. So again, thank you. And please hit that subscribe button. And also, it's very important when this video is done or while you're listening to it to hit that like button, because it tells YouTube that you actually like our content. For the one or two of you that do it, we thank you.
Right, for sure, especially in this algorithm. So,
right.
All right, so the next topic was going to be about RFK Jr. and just our thoughts on his candidacy thus far. And I obviously wanted to talk a little bit about the censorship that the Democratic Party is desperately attempting to do in this issue. I think that what I would want to start off with, and I've said this on Twitter, is he is currently my front runner for my vote. I don't agree with absolutely everything that he says. And the reason I say currently my front runner is that I haven't heard from the third party candidates yet because they haven't figured out who they are, stuff like that. I'm not by any means just like diving right in. But for now, I think one of the biggest things, this comes down to a conversation I had with Lynn Wood way back when he was still part of the Rittenhouse thing. He was on my show. And we just discussed candidates who have what I would call sincerity and give a shit factor. Like, do they really care, right? Like, I don't agree with everything that Ron Paul says, but I believe that he genuinely cares, right? And I feel that there are people who would say the same thing about other leftist politicians that I've supported over the years who are right-leaning, who would still recognize, well, yeah, I don't agree with his solutions, but I do believe, however, that he is a genuinely good person, right? And that's, to me, that gives people a huge amount of like push. I think Gary Johnson from the Libertarian Party is probably one of the best candidates they've had in recent memory. He genuinely cares, right? And when I talked to Spike Cohen, he's been on my show a few times. Very good interview, by the way. He and I talked off the air after we were done, and I said, well, because like I explained to him that I'm not a right-leaning libertarian anymore. But I wanted to give all the third-party candidates a chance to talk from all the different groups. And, I said, and he found that interesting. And I just said, well, let me put it to you this way. If, because this was a while ago. So, like, if you had to choose, like, if your family was going to vote for someone, would you rather they voted for Jill Stein or Hillary Clinton? And he said, without hesitation, definitely Jill Stein. I was like, well, there you go. So even from the perspective of, the sake of third-party voices, like you're still better off, but as far as to how RFK Jr. is, I find him highly sincere. I genuinely believe that he actually cares. And I genuinely believe that he is someone who, if his policies were proven to be poor for the people, that he would change them. So what are your impressions?
Well, I mean, I agree with, he's probably not my front runner just because I haven't picked anybody yet. But I mean, for everything else you said, I agree with. I think he is 100% sincere. He's not a career politician, even though his family has a career in politics or had a career in politics. But again, I think that he cares. I think that his position on things that I don't agree with still came from a thoughtful position. He's not toting a party line. He's not just saying, well, I have to say this in order to please the higher ups at the Democrat Party so I can get this and that. I think whatever his position is what he actually believes. And that does go a long way. Doesn't mean, just where we're different at doesn't, he believes it. He's sincere. I appreciate that and I respect it, but I can't necessarily support it 100%. So there's that. And I think, this is not going to be the last time we're going to do a show or part of the show on him for sure.
Right.
I think we're at some point in the near future going to do a really breakdown of his interviews and what he said on individual positions and talk about it from that point of view. Because I think it's important. I mean, there was questions about him on gun control and things like that libertarians wanted. And, as soon as that came out, I know a bunch of libertarians jumped ship. But, what's interesting about him is exactly that. Him coming onto the scene like that had conservatives, libertarians, independents, and Democrats going, "Whoa, who's this guy? I think I kind of like him," because he said something somewhere that each of them could resonate with, that they could say, "Wow." And I think as you pointed out, his sincerity is part of it. I think people are like, he seems like a very sincere guy. And that can be very important, particularly in this day and age where people aren't that sincere anymore.
Yeah, I would agree. And as far as his gun control position, the first interview I watched with him, he said, "I'm not taking your guns." Later on, there was some kind of statement by him that I could be wrong, by the way. This is why I said currently front runner, because it could change, right? Was that he said if there was a bipartisan bill to ban assault weapons, that he would sign it. But I think you and I both know there's never going to be a bipartisan bill, unless like neoconservative fascists take back over in the Republican Party, which isn't impossible, mind you. But I find it incredibly unlikely that there will be a bipartisan bill to ban assault weapons.
It's tough. I mean, right now there's just so much noise out there about it. But real quick, as we get started on this, Kennedy Jr., if you guys don't know, he was an environmental lawyer, a writer. He liked to write about the stuff that he did as a lawyer. And now he wants to be the nominee for the Democrat Party for president of the United States. He's the nephew of President John F. Kennedy and the son of Senator and Attorney General Robert Kennedy Sr. Both of them, John F. Kennedy and his uncle John F. Kennedy and his dad, were killed or assassinated, basically. And he himself, Kennedy Jr., who everybody calls RFK, would love the CIA and the government to finally open up and tell us why and who exactly killed them.
Yeah, and I'm all about that. The funny thing is, even Trump said he was going to release all that stuff, and more stuff did get released. But I think that stuff should have been public a long time ago. The notion that we even have to have that conversation, it happened forever ago. That was actually one of the points RFK made. He's like, you guys are talking about a murder that was most people, there are not even very many people who were alive when it happened, and they still don't want to discuss it, right? And so there's definitely something up with that. You ever notice that's another thing that's kind of weird is that more and more of these ideas that we would have discussed in 2008 that would have just been crazy are now kind of becoming common parlance. Like I imagine if we polled even just, you can't really poll them, right? Do it privately. You had a conversation with the average Joe, they're probably going to tell you they think JFK was assassinated by the CIA, right? As long as nobody's listening, as long as it's not public, as long as it's not, on their social media, they're probably going to say that, right? They're also going to have questions about 9/11. That doesn't necessarily mean that they think the government did it, but they're going to have questions, right? That's all becoming a lot more common now. And I noticed that because I have two different Facebook pages, one of which is for just straight up politics. I'll post whatever I want, no matter how controversial. The other one's a little more personal. But I posted this little 9/11 video. It's like 5 minutes long, and I think it's like 9/11 in 5 minutes. And nobody responded negatively to me posting it. It is very much a non-official story video. In fact, I got a lot of likes on it. I'm like, that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that video to be so positively received. But anyway, but yeah, I agree. We do need to declassify all that stuff.
Right. And do another show where we really go down positions and break out RFK Jr.'s positions on things. But particularly what we're talking about this segment on him, what's making this relevant to talk about in news is one, and this probably doesn't surprise most people, is the Democrats don't want him on the ballot, particularly as a Democrat candidate for president. And what else did you have there? They were censoring him.
Oh my goodness! So he was being asked by Jim Jordan to go to a hearing, and in the hearing they were going to be discussing censorship, and they started it off by trying to prevent RFK from being allowed to speak in the first place, given some weird clause that says if he's going to personally disparage people, that he should not be allowed to speak, even though that isn't what he did at all. And they, of course, were clinging to this notion that supposedly he's an anti-Semite, or that he's racist against Asians,
Axer is the
right, because he
story out
got
there.
caught, like, saying, well, it looks like it may have been engineered. It could have been ethnically engineered. He didn't say who did it or why. The thing is that I have a friend, like, isn't a real life friend, not an internet friend, who is a COVID nurse, who said it's very clear that the virus was nastier to certain races. Like, that was very obvious to her. And she's not some crazy conspiracy theorist. That's just what she experienced literally in the hospital, was that it seemed like certain races were doing worse than others.
Well, and that was the same thing, they were saying with the MMR. That's the one that they talk about causing all the vaccine. The concern there was with anybody that's African American descent has a higher chance of getting autism from the vaccine. Pointing it out doesn't make him racist. In fact, less than that, it makes it that he's concerned. He's very concerned. Like, hey, you're not telling this group of people that they have a higher chance of being affected by it. And that's the same thing with the COVID thing. You have to tell this group of people you have a higher chance of having bad effects from it than this other group of people.
Right. Real quick, I want to go ahead and, because I forgot to do this earlier, there were 2 super chats, and you should always read your super chats. From Ask Yoshka, I've never seen you here before. Welcome. Life frogs being boiled to death by slow incremental changes that go unnoticed. Labels are for cans and clothing, not people. And then part 2 is being against a group versus being against an individual in that group distinguishes the motivation. Anger or total support for any group is not reasonable. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I agree. I mean, we're all obviously about individualism here. And anytime you have anything where you try to group people into something, it's more of a collectivist mentality. And that is definitely not us. It's all about individualism, for sure. So, yeah, hopefully he didn't think that we were giving the impression that we were.
I think they were just commenting on what we were already saying. You can't take groups, as a whole. But yeah, I get.
Well, probably because of the Antifa comments, where we are basically grouping them as a whole. I think in that case, why else would you, as an individual, join that group? That would be my question. I mean, if you're a free thinker and you, what would be your point if you're anybody with any kind of moral standing to join that group?
Right. No, and I would agree. I mean, it's basically a domestic terrorist group. I don't support anybody who does that.
Right.
Like, I think there might be differences. I mean, I remember when I was analyzing the IRA, that a lot of members who got caught up in the Irish Republican Army were there because their brother got killed or something, didn't necessarily care about the cause. So things like that can happen, but that doesn't mean you should join a terrorist group,
Right.
but regardless. Anyway,
Now,
so going back to what we were talking about.
Well, and I see a comment that says RFK Jr., his support of Israel was very troubling. I find that Israel becomes some political conversation in our country. If you support it, it's troubling. If you don't support it, it's troubling, depending on whether you're talking to Republican or Democrat. And so I find it very interesting that Israel is a big part of our political conversation. I know they spend a lot of money in lobbying our politicians to give them money and to support whatever they're doing over there in their country. I personally don't look at a politician and wonder whether he supports or does not support Israel any more than I wonder if they support or don't support Germany or Taiwan.
Well, and I think that because this topic comes up a lot, and obviously because I'm on Good Logic's channel, not always as a guest, sometimes just in his stream, and he's Jewish. So the topic comes up quite a bit, but it comes down to this, is that my problem with the Israel thing, particularly in how the left treats it right now, is that if you don't just 100% go along with Palestine and absolutely everything, then they want you canceled. But on the drop of a hat, let's say, for example, if you shared Palestine's LGBTQ views, like anybody in the United States who felt the way that Palestinians do about the gay community, they would also want them canceled. Like, if not violence, because there's been a lot of rhetoric about, that they should start just, remember, they wanted the trans community to arm up and all of that. And I did a video earlier about this. It was called Trans Terrorism, because there was somebody saying, if you tried to prevent me from going into the women's bathroom, they would be the last mistake you ever made. So in other words, threaten to kill people, and so my point about this is only to say that it's weird to me because it's another strange bedfellows of the left is what I call it, because Palestine is not LGBTQ friendly at all, not even a little. As in, if they catch you by yourself, they may kill you, right? If they know that you're gay or trans. But at the same time, so for example, Andrew Yang was running for mayor of New York, and he made the statement, well, Israel does have the right to defend themselves. And that was in reference, I believe, to the Iron Dome, which is just a purely defensive missile system that they use, because Palestinian terrorists are just dropping rockets in population centers. They don't even know who they're hitting. They're not even going after military targets most of the time, right? So for saying that, they wanted Andrew Yang canceled, right? And so he loses the mayorship because the progressives got to have their pound of flesh. But it was literally within about 2 weeks, okay, that all of a sudden out of nowhere, they were slurping at Liz Cheney's feet, okay? And she is way pro-Israel, right? But Liz Cheney's such a hero because she talks shit about Trump. She's so brave. She'd be such a great president. She should run for president. That's literally the kind of shit that people were saying about her. In around the same time, there had been a school shooting. So they were against anybody who was, not for the assault weapons ban. Well, guess what? Liz Cheney is not for the assault weapons ban. But anyway, they can't keep their shit straight. But when it comes to support for Israel or Palestine, it's funny that I just mentioned the Irish Republican Army, because the situation reminds me a lot of Orange Irish versus Green Irish. Orange Irish people were essentially imported into Ireland by England and forcibly given land that didn't belong to them originally. That's why there was so much fighting. So we have this screwed up situation where Israel's not in a good circumstance. Palestine's not in a good circumstance. I tend to agree with Bernie Sanders on his suggestion of 2 states, but I'm also not just willing to say that we should just blanketly support the Palestinians and everything they do, because a lot of the Arab countries has some pretty backwards ideas that are definitely not libertarian, to put it lightly.
Right. So we got the super chat up there. I don't want to make the rest of this about Israel. We can do another show on that at some point. I think this all started because of Robert Kennedy Jr. and what somebody said his position was. But Shaka says Israel is a democracy. If Israel put down weapons, it would be wiped off the map. If terrorists put down their weapons, there would be peace. That
fair
is
point.
That's probably a fair point, without a doubt.
Right.
But moving on to our actual topic, which is Robert Kennedy Jr. being censored by his own party, being wanting to be removed from the ballot by his own party.
I actually have a clip for that. Let me pull it up while we're talking about it, and it's very short, but it's just they tried to block him from being allowed to talk at the censorship hearing, which apparently the irony was not lost on them, right? And then and these hearings frequently are just an example of why we have free speech, because they use the parliamentary procedure to allow them to say whatever they want about someone, and then if you try to say anything in response, then they'll say reclaiming my time. So they were free to just shit all over RFK, and they did. And the funny thing, it was the same usual suspects, because it was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and then I'm going to forget her name, black woman who I guess isn't even really a real senator. She's like for the Virgin Islands or something, and then she has all these connections to Jeffrey Epstein. But anyway, those two team up on these witnesses and go after them. They did the same thing to Matt Taibbi during the Twitter files. Plaskett, I think, is her name. And she's in this, you can hear her voice anyway in this clip that I'm going to show us here in a moment. But the point is that they were desperate to prevent him from talking. And the Democratic Party, even people like AOC, are becoming way too comfortable with censorship being the solution for anybody, being allowed to just say anything that they don't agree with. They don't even want to argue anymore. Did you have a comment on that before I play this clip?
Other than it seems very true. I kind of have the same perception about that you do. Obviously, I think that's if you have bad policies, that's the best way to keep pushing them, is to censor people.
Right. Yeah. Bobby called her ranking member. People keep saying ranking member. That is what she gets referred to as. Thinking it's something to do with her status, because again, she doesn't even get to vote, but she gets to come to all of these things as if she was a senator. So anyway, let's play it.
I have one other question I could ask, but I would first give you a chance to ask the question if you had. I just have one quick question for Mr. Kennedy. But I want to be fair. If you got an extra question you want to ask Ms. Wiley or any witnesses, I'll turn to you first.
So to explain what you're looking at right there, and I put a little thing up this, like, basically he wanted to ask Kennedy one more thing. When you go to these things, that's the other thing. It's like the two sides have their own witnesses, right? So there were witnesses that were on the opposite end of the issue, and then there were witnesses on that end. So Jordan, in good faith, says, "Hey, I'm going to ask Kennedy one more thing. So do you have anything for your witness?" And they said, "Well, yeah, okay." And then they go ahead and ask a question. But then let's see what happens after the fact. And I want to give a little background. Earlier on, they tried to gotcha Kennedy by bringing up a super PAC that they said supported him. And he's like, "I don't even know who you're talking about." And then over the course of the hearing, he found out, "Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I don't know who they," he's like, "There are somebody that we are connected to that's connected to them." He's going to get into that in a moment. The point is that they tried to smear him and they were not going to give him any opportunity to clarify it. And that's what you see right here.
I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. We appreciate the work you're doing to defend the First Amendment. And thank you for just very compelling answers and compelling testimony and the work you've done and how important this is for the country. I mean, if we don't have a First Amendment, it's just, I'm frightened by where we go.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
You may not. You may not.
I just
Mr.
want to
Chair.
respond.
Mr. Chair, the time is out. We're done.
I haven't adjourned the hearing, and I don't think you're the chair.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Chairman's discretion.
I
We're
know
gonna let
it's
Mr.
your
Kennedy-
discretion,
We're going to
but
let Mr. Kennedy.
he has had so much additional time.
Well, I think everyone's had
Why?
additional time.
No,
and we're gonna
why?
get-
Why are you doing that specifically for him?
Because
I
we
just
don't,
want
as
to
opposed to other
explain
people. I'm sure the witness,
super PAC.
I'm sure the
on
Democratic
other
witness will be
places.
as short as he possibly can.
No. Are you going to allow our witness to just give another piece?
No, let him address the defamatory comment that was made
address-
about him that's untrue.
That was not defamatory. That is a legal definition that was not met.
I want to
And was
acknowledge
it my-
information about the super PAC that you mentioned.
Go ahead.
I've just been told that that super PAC is connected to somebody that we have a connection to. It's not a super PAC that I've endorsed, and it's not one, as I said, that I've ever heard of.
Thank the gentleman for that statement, and I thank you for your testimony. The committee is now adjourned.
So just like the Karen behavior there, it's like, "No, you may not. We're done." Like you may not. Like she's his mom or something. Like that's not what those rules were created for. Was to facilitate that kind of behavior.
Well, I mean, I think when you're up there and you're that lady, that you have to put on a show. You know, you have to convince the people who support you and your cause that you're doing everything you can to push the agenda you're supposed to push. You know, I think at the end, it's not surprising. You know, anytime you have what I would consider a decent or good candidate, they don't want them to speak. We remember what they did to Ron Paul during the debates and how they treated him. You remember what they did to Bernie Sanders. You know, you can go down the list of people who, if that person was popular amongst the grassroots, you guarantee that the establishment was going to hate them and not give them the voice.
Well, right. And that was so much worse during the Ron Paul era. And that's why it's, again, ironic to have Dennis Kucinich sitting right behind him because he's his campaign manager. And I actually made a meme out of it, but it was like, because Dennis had this huge grin on his face most of the time that his candidate was talking, because it's like easy mode, because RFK is a very good orator. He knows how to speak and sound, again, very sincere. But Dennis Kucinich was one of the guys that they went after because he kept suggesting we should impeach George Bush and Dick Cheney, and and that the Patriot Act was wrong. Of course they don't want that guy to be allowed to talk. Obviously, Senator Gravel, same thing, anti-war, anti-Patriot Act. Can't have him talking. And then Ron Paul, and that's why I tell a lot of these young people now that they don't realize how easy they have it, because something has clearly changed. Because if Bernie was running in 2008, he would have ended up like Kucinich, right? They could not have they couldn't just turn him off. And it's because of the public support and the internet. And it's the same thing with Ron Paul. And the Ron Paul thing is very important because I keep telling Republicans, they agree with me that Bernie Sanders was mistreated by the DNC. They're like, well, that's just the corruption of the DNC. I'm like, don't think this doesn't happen in your party too. Like the only reason, because they wanted to get rid of Trump. The Republican Party, the elites anyway, they don't like Trump. They didn't want Trump. They wanted another stuffed shirt pro-war candidate.
Right.
And the only reason they're turning on him now is because they got him into office. They were hoping they could sway him to just be another neocon and attack countries, and he wouldn't do it. So that's the only reason people like Liz Cheney or any of these others have any problems with Donald Trump, is because he won't invade countries for them.
Right. Now, these parties are private parties. They get to make their own rules. We've discussed that before, and they get to change the rules as they go. And, they're already pushing to make sure that Kennedy Jr. doesn't get on the ballot and be able to run they don't want anybody to oppose Biden in the primaries at all. And the fact that he's trying to do it, I think I heard on one of the interviews that hasn't been done in over 100 years, that somebody's tried to challenge the president of the candidate that's the president in their party to directly challenge them like that. It's usually the opposite party only challenging them. They let that person go and not challenging them. So Kennedy's doing something that hasn't been done in a very long time by wanting to challenge Biden. Now, most people are going to say, well, he shouldn't, he shouldn't. The party's right. They shouldn't allow that. I think if you talk about democracy and wanting to support democracy in the way that it's talked about, then that's very, very much against it and the opposite of it. If he wants to run and he wants to oppose him in the primaries, he should be allowed to do it. Given that they're a private party, you bet they're going to win and they're going to be able to silence him. And he's going to have no choice but to run as an independent or find another party to run it in. And that suits them quite well, because the Democrats and Republicans get together and make the voting rules across the country. So it's very easy for them to make it hard for independents and third parties to gain any traction or get anywhere. So their first step is going to make sure that he doesn't get on the ballot and oppose Biden. And then they'll do everything they can after that, obviously. Now, what I find that interesting on their strategy is that some way is going to backfire on them, because he's going to take a lot of the Democrat votes who are very much not happy with Biden. So if he goes over to another political party or independent, he is going to take votes away from Joe Biden, and Joe Biden, assuming that there would be no election fraud, wouldn't get 81 million votes again.
Right. And it's not just him either. Like, I mean, the reality is that as far as the progressives, the ones that were for Bernie that got bullied into voting for Biden, they didn't get basically anything that they were told they were going to get. In the typical fashion, what always seems to happen is that the progressives in the Democratic Party essentially are like the abused girlfriend that you slap around during the primary. And then when the general shows up, then you show up with candy and flowers and tell them, don't worry, I'll never do that again. Right. And they fall for it every single election. Like Hillary Clinton claimed to have been, like, I was told that I needed to vote for Hillary Clinton because she had adopted a bunch of Bernie's policies, supposedly. And I'm like, that ain't happening. Like, there's no freaking way. I don't believe anything that woman says. And you should either, and honestly, I think she would have invaded Syria too. She was a big war hawk. And I think that Trump getting elected screwed up all of their plans. When I worked for Jesse Ventura for his exploratory committee, he made that same observation, and he was very surprised. He's like, the only reason they want him out of here is because he's anti-war. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think he'll still be anti-war, and I think they're worried about that. And, the other thing is that, as messed up as this is, even from the perspective of the independent voter, I don't think my life was better under Biden than it was under Trump in just basic ways, right? Gas prices being part of it, the state of the economy, minus COVID, mind you, of course. But COVID wasn't Trump's fault, right? It was a situation that really nobody could have handled any better. And so, but...
Well, I mean, it definitely could have been handled better. Shoot.
Well, as far as the economy, I'm not talking about the lockdowns. I'm talking about the way the economy was impacted. If you're going to have a pandemic that's going to impact the economy, there isn't anything, like if Biden was in charge, literally nothing would have been different. If anything, it would have been more authoritarian. That's what I was getting.
Well, I agree. It would have been more authoritarian, without a doubt. It's individually around me, people I talk to, I know a lot of independent free thinkers, And at times I think that gives me hope. Like, oh, okay, this country is finally getting somewhere. Social media, independent news is finally getting somewhere. And then elections happen. And all over again, I'm convinced that people are just about sound bites. And that's what they still use. They got Kennedy Jr. He's anti-vaxxer. They're going to label him as that. They're going to label him as a pro-Putin, which I just to this day still don't understand why we talk about Russia and Putin like there's some kind of monster under the bed. It's just not there, and we act like it is, and that's part of the sound bites on there. But when you listen to Kennedy Jr. talk about vaccines or the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there's nowhere in there that he's anti-vax or he's pro-Putin. But they're going to use all these sound bites to go against him and to convince people. And that to me is where I start losing faith again in the American people and in, when it comes to elections. So again, around me individually, people I find are free thinkers and, can think for themselves. But then the elections prove me wrong and show that America is still controlled. The majority voters are still sheep, and they only know what NPR or CNN or Fox News told them to think, and not the other way around.
Right. And it's important to mention Fox News in the same category as MSNBC and all of these other, mediums. They're all bullshit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the other thing that's different, Brian, and I have to say that things are changing, is that, well, for one thing, as was pointed out multiple times on Breaking Points, which I don't endorse Crystal Ball specifically, but Sagar and Jetty is really good. And she's usually better about her attitudes about journalism. But she said that Antifa was mostly fake, and that was the end of me, ever, just completely taking her seriously altogether. But Sagar's pretty good about this. But they pointed out that at this point, this is what's messed up. Tucker Carlson had the most viewership, and he's now getting more than he ever did on Fox on Twitter, right? The whole paradigm.
Because you don't have to subscribe to a cable network now. You can just do it for free.
Well, that's part of it. But at the same time, in general, many of these YouTube people, Crystal and Sagar, get more views than CNN, and they're just a YouTube channel.
Right.
Russell Brand has millions of people. Joe Rogan. Why are they so worried about Joe Rogan? They're worried about Joe Rogan because he'll bring on people from both sides of the aisle, ask them direct questions, and allow them to answer those questions in good faith.
As it should.
That's really fucking dangerous to the establishment.
It is, and that's what they don't want. They want the soundbite Americans. They want those people who just believed what the news told them how to think and how to vote, and that's it. It still hasn't given me enough hope yet. What I like, as we get back to Kennedy Jr., and you asked me in the beginning how I feel about him, what I like is it's going to shake things up. I never liked Trump's policies. I liked things that he said, and I liked that he was going to shake things up, that it was no longer a career politician coming in there. This whole drain the swamp and go after the deep state. He didn't do it, but it was said. And that, I think, was very important, that somebody with that amount of voice and popularity was at least talking about the deep state, was talking about the corruption in the swamp. Those are very important things. And what I like about Kennedy Jr. is it's a shakeup. He's going in there and he's going to give the establishment a scare. He's going to shake things up and get a portion of the population thinking again, going, wait a second, there are better people out there for this country than this guy. It might not work. He's most likely not going to win, but I like that shakeup. I don't have to agree with all his positions. I like that he's out there trying to say, this is not right, because I agree with him. What's going on in this country is not right. The way the establishment is not right, and it needs to be shaken up. And that part I am all for. I wish it would succeed. Again, 100% not for all his positions. But if you're asking me the choice between, do I want Biden or Kennedy Jr., Kennedy Jr. in my mind wins hands down, if those are my only two choices.
Right. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that there are plenty of other Republicans with you on that. And that's what's messed up, is that people say, well, Republicans like you means there's something wrong with you. And
right.
You guys are missing the mark.
Yeah.
Why do we like him? Because I think South Park broke this down very well in one of their parodies using Mr. Garrison as Donald Trump. Wasn't that the parody Donald Trump they were using was saying amazing things, is that he sounded like a genuine person. And that was what was swaying everybody, right? It's also why Bernie did so much better than he ever would have in 2008. People in general are just sick of plastic candidates, and they're becoming more conscious as voters. I mentioned this when you and I were talking and reminiscing about the past, we used to watch this video called Why Ron Paul Did Not Win the Florida Primary. And the guy wasn't talking about Ron Paul. He was just walking on a beach asking people who they voted for and why. And they knew nothing about the candidates that they voted for, or their understanding of their candidates were very superficial, right? And that was the other point I forgot to mention when I was bringing up the mainstream media, is that RFK Jr. got more views by being on Russell Brand, by being on Jordan Peterson, bipartisan. Russell Brand's an anarcho-communist. Jordan Peterson's a conservative. He's been on Breaking Points. He's been on like pretty much all of the major YouTube people are bringing this guy on, right? Independent media understands that people want to hear from these people, and that's breaking the mainstream media's stranglehold on the system. And that's why in my last stream, I just played it again, but there's this really disturbing video of mainstream media pundits talking about what's dangerous to our democracy. And it was very evident that somebody had submitted a speech to be stated by literally every news outlet that independent news, like what you and I are participating in right now, is very dangerous to our democracy. And the guy who put together the video did a great job, because it sounded like the Borg from Star Trek talking in unison. This is very dangerous to our democracy, right? Because it sounded like it, because they were all literally reading the same speech. And these people were on MSNBC, ABC, and, all of them, Fox, and so right and left media were both reading from this. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. You shouldn't tune into YouTube for your news.
Yeah, and they do that. It's already out there. Like, you shouldn't, this election's too important. Do not vote third party. Do not pick a third party candidate. This election's too important. As if the third party candidate doesn't bring anything to the table. So voting for them is a bad thing. And they do this every election's too important. Don't vote Libertarian because, you need a Democrat or Republican because this election's too important. Only a Democrat or Republican can solve our problems. It's the other thing that really drives me nuts, and I wish we could get away from, and everybody does this. It's just so natural right now, is we give too much power credit to the president of the United States. What their job description is in the Constitution is very limited, and yet we act like everything that happens, economy, things like that, is directly driven by them. That Congress, that other factors aren't involved. You kind of did that there when you talked about the economy under Trump compared to Biden. It's really, when you look at it, it's when a Republican Congress is in and a Democrat president is in, there's actually the least amount of spending that goes on out there, because it actually is more about Congress and what happens there. Remember, president only signs the bills. He doesn't create the laws, or he's not supposed to create the laws. Congress does that. He signs or vetoes it. That's his job. His job is commander in chief. Yet we all want the president to answer, or the presidential candidates to answer all these questions. Like, how do you feel on this and that? Things that aren't even in his job description, that aren't even based on his job description. And so we've gotten very far away. We treat the president like he's the almighty king, or queen, but in this case, males in, so king. But that's how we've come to, and the powers that be wanted that done on purpose. Okay, they wanted us to ignore where we really have the say and control over. Remember, we directly pick who our congressmen are. The Electoral College picks who the president is. And that's a big distinction and understanding. But job description, I know a lot of times when you bring up, Ron Paul always said it, if we just followed the Constitution, Libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, they all want to point out how the Constitution isn't perfect. The Constitution is open for interpretation. It really isn't that open for interpretation. The whole idea around it, the whole premise, was to limit the power of the federal government and to give the power to the states and the people. And that's where it lies. That's what it's about. The Bill of Rights was set on for a reason. And those 10 Bill of Rights are in there for a reason, because that is basically not, you have the government's giving you these rights. These are what the government cannot do to you. They have no right to do this to you, to take this away from you. And we give too much power to the office of the presidency that is not supposed to be there.
Well, right. And I think that goes back to kind of what we were discussing earlier about the power of local politics. We don't even participate in the system the way it's designed. if you're concerned about, say, critical race theory getting into your schools, you can do a lot more for that by just going and actually participating in your school board elections and actually paying attention to who you're voting for. If you're concerned about policing in your local community, who you voted for sheriff is going to have a hell of a lot bigger impact on that than who the president of the United States is.
Right.
And in most cases, like when I ran for Congress, people didn't even know who their congressman was, right? So I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I'm just saying that when people act like Trump getting elected would be this post-apocalyptic thing, that's what they said last time. And I'm like, I don't seem to recall an apocalypse taking place while he was in charge. You guys are going to have to do a little better than that, right? Because the idea that he was this horrible thing, so horrible in fact that we need to ignore that Joe Biden is a rapist. We need to ignore that Joe Biden is pro-war. We need to ignore all of those things because Trump is so bad. Trump derangement syndrome is just nuts. It's like, that's why I was like, no, I'm sorry. Because if Trump wins again, and it's entirely possible that he will, I'm not going to shed too many tears about it at this point. Again, I'm not going to vote for the guy. I will probably vote third party. But but when you talk about the scenario, if you had a choice of only two candidates, as of right now, even as left-leaning as I am, if you put a gun to my head and said Trump or Biden at this point, I'm leaning Trump. And the funny thing is, a lot of my old school leftist friends agree. And a large part of it is that they feel that Trump is not being manipulated by the neoconservatives. Whereas Glenn Greenwald has very pointedly pointed out, the same people who brought us Iraq are pushing for Ukraine right now.
Right. You look at anybody who's not Trump, besides RFK Jr., but you look at Biden, you look at Obama, you look at Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, any of those, they go by the party line. Whatever the party line is, that's what they go by. They will gladly tell you one thing during their speech to get elected and do the opposite of that. They are essentially predictable. That's what they are. What Trump is, and a friend of mine, Tom Mullen, who had the show Tom Mullen Talks Freedom. He's wrote a couple books. I call him Libertarian #1. What he said about Donald Trump, and I tend to agree with, is this: that he is an unmanned machine gun on a swivel. Sometimes he hits the target you want. Most of the time he doesn't. The difference, what we're saying there, is he is not that predictable. And he will have some good policies. Biden and Cheney and them are very predictable, and their policies stink.
Well, right. And I would say that this is another point that I made with, and again, this friend in particular, he's actually an anarcho-communist, one of the older school ones, but he and I have both been following this neoconservative thing very closely. But it comes down to this: Joe Biden's not giving the progressives anything he said they would. He's not going to make college free. He's not going to raise the minimum wage. He's not going to do anything meaningful. Like he said to everybody, nothing significant will change. But I got to tell you this, especially with the controversy over what specifically Trump supposedly, what was in the documents that he took out that were so controversial, was plans for war with Iran. And as Senator Gravel pointed out, the late Senator Gravel, when I was still working for him, he said that the only reason we haven't invaded Iran yet, largely, is because we don't have a draft. To invade Iran would take an enormous amount of boots on the ground. And that's why he looked at it, because he doesn't think everybody understands the true danger of it. But I put it like this: if Donald Trump is president, my son's not going to get drafted to sent to Iran. With Joe Biden, I don't know for sure.
Right. Exactly. What I liked about Trump, anti-war, but Trump was also not very good on the Second Amendment. He was very bad on that. So, with Trump, you kind of take the good with the bad. With the other politicians like Joe Biden, you take the bad with the bad, as far as I'm concerned, and how that goes. We obviously weren't prepared for Iraq. We went in there. We created ISIS as a result of going into Iraq. Going into Iran will not get us any better results. So I am all for an anti-war candidate. That's where Robert Kennedy Jr. does definitely get my vote on there. He would seek peace in any chance he got over war. As far as Biden, free college, paying off tuition, all that, he tried all that stuff. Somebody who has been in politics as long as he has, he kind of forgot he's not the king. He thought he was. He thought being elected president with the quote unquote 81 million votes would make him king, and he could go there and do whatever he want. He forgot that there's a structure and that Congress and the Supreme Court exist as well. So while he tried to,
I don't know. I don't think he ever really tried. I don't think he ever gave a shit about it in the first place. But that's what they do to win the progressives over every 4 years, Brian.
Right.
Clinton said the same shit. Do you think she was going to do any of that? I don't. No,
Right.
They don't care about any of that shit.
They care as long as they think it gets him a vote.
Well, right. And that's, one of the things also my friend pointed out was that this is another thing about progressives that they don't tend to understand, especially, I don't know if you've seen the meme that I've been sharing, but it's like the modern leftist version of the political compass, and only the upper left-hand corner, full authoritarian leftist, is left and everything else is far right. That's how they want people to believe that the political compass works. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists, so to speak,
Right.
quoting George Bush again. I don't think that he ever really gave a shit about any of that stuff. His corporate owners don't want that kind of stuff. They like things the way they are. That's also why he's not interested in pushing for universal health care, because that lobby's huge. And then, of course, that's why we're in this situation we are in the war in Ukraine. And I don't cover Ukraine very much, largely because of the fact that, well, one time I did, I got banned for a week for supposedly dangerous information, even though all I was doing was playing videos on Twitter and making it very clear I can't verify if any of these are actually footage from Ukraine, by the way, because there's no way to do it. But just everybody involved in the situation has a reason to lie. Everybody involved has a reason to lie. And so I think that we're not going to learn the truth about it until much later. But I know this, the military industrial complex is doing what it always does and is making enormous amounts of money in this situation. I'm sure they're happy as clams, right? So anyway,
Yep.
I would say that we've been at this now for about 2 hours. I think it's been a good conversation. And I'm still interested to see how the RFK Jr. thing plays out. Ironically, it's actually Senator Gravel's influence on me about this. He said that unfortunately, he's like, don't allow yourself to hero worship anyone. And that includes me. That includes Ron Paul. That includes any of these people. And what he was getting at was just to say that you may find out something later on that you don't agree with. Don't find yourself overly loyal to someone that their shit just doesn't stink. Right.
Right.
And I would have to say that there are some people on the Trump side, for example, that's how it is for them. And so be careful about that stuff. Don't let yourself become a complete sycophant for anybody. As of right now, I think that RFK is the most sincere person running for president.
Definitely, without a doubt. As of right now, we of course have no clue who the Libertarian Party has yet. They haven't had their convention, so we don't know. And the ones that are running, I mean, a lot of them are true libertarians for sure, but that doesn't impress the rest of the American voters. So,
Well, hopefully you guys will run Spike Cohen, because he's fantastic. I don't know if you've ever listened to him talk, but he's one of my favorite interviews.
And don't say you guys. I don't do the whole party thing.
Oh, I thought you were in the party. See, you learn something new every day.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've donated to the party just because, I want to help shake up the establishment. I want to see third parties get further, but I don't think my little $20 is worth talking about in really making a big impact. So, yes, I have supported the Libertarian Party, but I am not a party person, if that makes sense.
You finally came to the truth about the dark money in the Libertarian Party. It's
that's
all coming from a man named Brian Seaman.
That's how they got as powerful as they are, because of my $20 donation.
Well, it's obviously dark money. I mean, look at you. You look like you're floating in outer space. Because it's pitch black where you are.
There is a possibility that I am floating in outer space, Neil.
Oh, that's true. Well, we're all admitting about aliens. We got to do a show about aliens, man.
I was just going to say that. Maybe next week we have to do a show about aliens.
That was like when we talked about Ray, our former co-host who sadly passed away. He lived in New Mexico out in the middle of nowhere. And I asked him about UFOs. He's like, dude, it's every day.
Right.
It's just so normal out here. We expect it. I was like,
wow. Because of me. I was out there first and got him out there. But yes, stories we could tell for sure. Exactly that, unidentified. But you also remember, you had Kirtland Air Force Base, which is in Albuquerque. They had can't think of the Air Force Base out there in Roswell now, where it's the home of the stealth fighters. There's a lot of military activity. So the term UFO does apply as far as unidentifiable flying object.
Oh yeah, they can be domestic. I mean, it's pretty clear. For example, people were looking at B2s and F-117s and stuff like that. I didn't realize what they were looking at. F-117, I think that's the right one. Anyway, I just brought up the super chat, and then you took it down because you're a meanie.
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
Because I didn't. It's fine. I'll forgive you this time. Just don't ever let it happen again, or I'm going to force you to watch the Home Shopping Network. Okay. Oh no, wrong one. Now I can't find it again.
I had already put it up there. I put it up there before you and kept it up.
Yeah,
there.
just basically, yes, thank you for your support, by the way. And it's good to see you here. You said you've been here for a while. There it is. I found it. But I'd be interested to see in the chat if you could explain how you found us. Because I'm curious how the algorithm is working, because most people who find me nowadays pretty much only find me if I'm on someone else's stream. So because the algorithm doesn't like me. So and also Scrappy, you said you're a big time Big L libertarian. You should definitely be subscribed to Liberty Unleashed. Because he's
real Scrappy,
for doing all kinds of libertarian stuff over there. So but anyway, all right. So any final thoughts?
As normal, Scrappy and everybody else, get over to my channel, Liberty Unleashed, and hit the subscribe button. Everybody give us a like so we can tell YouTube and the rest of the world that you actually like us. I like to brag to my friends that people like me because, that's what I do. But we'll be back to doing this weekly again. As always, we don't know what our topic is for next week. We kind of wait until the last minute to decide that. That's how Neil and I roll with that. But again, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, or smash the subscribe button and hit the like. Just smash them both. That's what I would do if I were you.
Right.
Get out there and do it. As always, Neil, the topic was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I can't say that the song was as controversial as I thought it was going into it, or as everybody made it sound.
Were you looking for some some graphic sex and violence and nudity?
I was always looking for some graphic sex and violence and nudity. I mean, what's not to look for there?
Well, that's an interesting point. But no, I agree. Not as controversial. It's only controversial because you're not allowed to oppose riots. That's racism.
Oh yes, my fault there. I knew that. Yes.
Right.
Anyway.
So, thank you everybody for tuning in today. And again, as he pointed out, if you haven't subscribed to Liberty Unleashed, that's his channel. He and I worked together all the way back since 2008. You can go back and still find a lot of those broadcasts on Blog Talk Radio, I believe. But
yeah, you'd have to look up the North Virginia
Patriots show.
North Virginia Patriots MVP.
We need to find a logo for that and stick it on our backdrop just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
I always wonder about all those people we used to interact with back then, like Non Servium and the Eternal Optimist and all those different guys that we used to do shows with back in the day, and Ron Paul Radio. But anyway, check out Liberty Unleashed, a lot of his stuff, because again, if you're one of those people who is here who's just tolerating my left-leaning positions, Brian's a bit more right-leaning than me, and I guess, Ask is just like throwing money at me here. So $10, thank for streaming. Hey man, you know what? If you want to come back and throw those super chats at me, I appreciate it, because right now I'm in a tough spot financially. It's like right after I told all my viewers,
with me, he's greedy.
No, well, okay. Well, you know what? When you pay for Restream, then I'll start giving you some money. Okay.
All right. Fine.
No, that's fair. But anyway, no. If we get huge, though, we're definitely gonna have that conversation. And then, obviously, from my unrequited love, Steel Stargazer, does anyone know where unused money donors go after a person loses an election? Where the unused money goes? There are rules about that. I know Ron Paul, for example, took his unused money and put it into a super PAC, like the Liberty PAC,
right?
Which then can in turn donate to other people. Pretty sure that's what Bernie did too. In general, that's what happens. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I don't know all the rules. I know you can't just necessarily transfer to your personal bank account, but beyond that, I think it all goes usually to a PAC, super PAC of some kind, to help somebody else out or to help them the next time around.
So Jacob Peaks asks, going back to weekly, yes, the Liberty Unleashed co-show with V Radio is on Sundays at 6. He had to do a family vacation or something, and I needed to take a break every now and then. The only reason why I don't commit to regular schedules, and I was actually I've been burned out lately, but part of it is I just did a burst of like 6 or 7 streams, like right in a row, and they were long too. And then I did individual videos.
Listeners' fault.
Yeah, that's not your fault at all. I'm just saying that the reason that sometimes you'll see me disappear every now and then is if I don't feel I'm in the right mindset, and if I force myself to do it when I'm not, you're just gonna get crappy videos. It's not gonna be good. So that's why occasionally you'll see me drip off. But like, we have some topics that we've discussed, things like, discussing what is left libertarianism. We talk about UFOs, we have other possible things we can discuss going forward. And if you guys, as our listeners,
I'd like to do cryptocurrency sometime. Get into that as well.
I don't know anything about that.
That's why I want to educate you and everybody else out there who doesn't know about it.
Right. And we were going to review the anarchists. We need to do that.
Oh yeah,
I'm curious about the anarchists.
We got a list of topics and only one day a week that we do it. Maybe we'll have to do some surprise shows during the week sometime.
Well, not to mention you need to do some Liberty Unleashed stuff too. Well, that's just you.
Well, I'm working on documentaries right now when we're not doing this show that I'm going to post up there. I'm not even going to tell you what's coming out. That's how cool they are. Then I'm going to wait until I can premiere them.
Right. I'm still working on the OK Groomer documentary, which I'm probably gonna have to release on BitChute because I'm just gonna play all of the stuff that they claim is not happening. Some of that is graphic. I am working on a little video right now. Part of it is I need to get all of my sound filters back on. I don't know what I did, but I deleted them. So I don't have the super sexy voice that you're all so familiar with here at V Radio without my proper sound equipment. But anyway,
you did that for the host show. I would have to hang up on you.
Yeah, you'd probably just get too turned on, and you have to go find your wife. Like, sweetheart, I need to give you some love. Anyway,
same reason you don't show your face.
There was a video that was actually circulated apparently back in 2015 of this what looks to be a gay kid, maybe about 9 years old, twerking, at a pride parade. I thought it was more recent, but I found out like more specifically what the reactions were to the controversy. I'll be doing a little video about that. But OK Groomer is just about, I'm getting just tired of them consistently lying about the things that are supposedly not happening. And I'm just going to put them all in a documentary, and it's going to be pretty graphic. I mean, I've already had to stick a bunch of things over there, like the truth about, for example, George Takei, who openly states that nobody's being groomed, yet come to find out his first sexual relationship was at the age of 13 with an adult camp counselor. So maybe he does have some relationship with that. That's the kind of stuff, there you go there. But in any case, thanks again for tuning in. Did you have any other final thoughts, Brian?
No, man. I appreciate everybody listening to us, and we'll talk to you all next week. Peace out.
All right. Take care.